You may stop over and get one from you, Jim.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor and City Council Workshop, Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. If you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Please show all council present with 2 members virtual. Next up, we have review of the minutes of July 8th, 2024 combined meeting. Comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm proceeding down to council member statement regarding conflicts of interest on agenda items. Would any council members like to make a statement today? Hearing none, I'm proceeding down. Public comment pertaining to non-agenda items. If you have a public comment pertaining to nothing that is current on the current agenda. Seeing none, I'm proceeding down. Resolution, ordinances, and agreements. Introduction, ordinance 06-2024, Main Street Advisory Board Code revisions. Jim, would you like to lead us off on this?
Sure. This is the ordinance we talked about a couple months ago. The board had questioned the need for the subcommittees or the work groups to have their meetings be open to the public. So this ordinance basically would strike the language in the code that requires that as one of the parameters of the Main Street function.
Any further comments, questions, concerns by council?
No, it's just a simple striking of the language.
Right, so we'll have, we can certainly keep that in mind as we have our Main Street discussion later in the evening under new business also. But this would satisfy what the board had requested.
Sounds good. Any additional comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, I am proceeding down to ordinance 07-2024 fiscal year 2023-2024 budget amendment number 5. Jim, if you'd like to lead us off again.
Okay. As soon as I find my notated copies here. Okay. So this is basically our year-end truing up where we carry over things that cross the fiscal year. So projects that we started in fiscal year 24 that are not going to be finished into fiscal year 25. Also, we've had some changes in the revenue where we actually had more money come in for real estate revenue. We had underestimated, so we saw more revenue than we expected, and it was a big enough amount that we wanted to correct it on the budget. Basically, for the general fund, the net on the revenue change is $272,125. All those items that are listed there. State tax income revenue, real estate taxes, interest income was higher than we projected. So that nets out to $272,125, and then on the expenditure side, of course, it nets to the same amount, $272,125. And this also includes the 2 items that were in the budget amendment that did not pass in June. So to try to true things up with what we really spent, we did include them in this amendment. So there's the additional money that we donated to the fire company, and then also the adjustment for the police salaries where we moved from one category under police to another. So this would true up what was actually spent in FY24 there. So everything's kind of laid out line by line. So if there are any questions, if I can't answer them tonight, I'll have the answers for Monday.
Questions, comments, concerns by council?
No questions.
And on the utility fund, same sort of thing. Bank interest was higher than originally projected on the revenue side. And we also, our billing was a little higher because usage was higher than projected. So that comes out to $335,000 more in revenue. And then, of course, offsetting that, let's see. Well, the net is $335,000, but we ended up spending less on water meters than we expected, but then we ended up spending more on chemicals and waste hauling at the wastewater treatment plant. So that basically offsets the change in the revenue side.
Sounds good. Additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
Will the extra hauling, will that be alleviated with the current construction?
We've been using roll-off containers
Right.
in the sludge, basically to receive the sludge out of the belt filter press. And now with the new press in operation, there's going to be a dryer cake. And also we've been trying to keep that clear for the construction of the project. So going forward, we're not going to have those monthly, that monthly expense for those roll-off containers.
Nice.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm proceeding on to the next. Ordinance 08-2024, fiscal year 2024-2025, budget amendment number 1. Jim?
This is basically the other half of the stuff that we're rolling forward. Some projects that carried over from FY '24. On the general fund side, we had, we received more grant revenue for parks than projected because, well, we did get grant revenue for the tot lot and lighting project that wasn't in the original budget. And we're using less out of fund balance. On the expense side, and that comes out to a net of $7,684. And then on the expense side of that, we're, we had to push forward police radios because they were not received in 2024. Same thing with cars, we had to carry them over. And also with the storage shed for the police site also. So then we also increase expenditures for FY '25 with the purchase of the street sweeper. That was not in the original budget, so we added that. And we're decreasing by moving the splash pad project back a couple years, so that's going to be a decrease to the expenditures. And also, one more increase is the field lighting and tot lot that hadn't originally projected. That's $193,000 between those two. So again, the increased spending is $7,684, so it nets with the increased revenue. On the utility side, we did, as I think I made you aware last week, we finally heard back from the Department of the Environment for the offer to settle for violations at the wastewater treatment plant prior to 2023. They did reduce that figure significantly, but they're still charging us a $40,000 penalty. So that has been added as an increase on our expenditures. And we're basically pulling that from savings because we generally don't budget for penalties. So on that note, I think a lot of effort went into working with MDE, demonstrating, the progress that we've made between, engineering, funding, and constructing these utility projects that have helped us reach compliance with the plant. So a lot of effort went into that leading up to our meeting with them back in November. And certainly we would have loved to see a greater reduction in the penalty, but we probably spent a couple $1,000s working on that and working through it with them, but we saved $35,000 as a result. So, I think effort well spent there. So anyhow, so that's on the utility fund for the FY '24-25 amendment.
That wipes the slate clean with MDE.
Yep, for up to 2023.
As long as we keep our noses clean and the charts look good, so.
Right, and we did, of course, meet compliance and, meet our permit in 2023, so we just need to, now our task is to keep it that way.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm proceeding on. Adoption Resolution 2024-11, water allocation for August. Questions, comments, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm proceeding on. City Manager report, Jim.
Okay. On capital equipment, we've placed our orders from Public Works for both the street sweeper and the vac truck. So the police department has taken delivery of 2 of their police vehicles. As I think we had talked about before, we ended up getting the Durangos rather than the Ford Explorers, just because we've been trying to get them and we just can't get them. So rather than continuing to fall behind in our rotation of vehicles, we opted to try the other vehicles. So hopefully they'll work out well for us. The Durangos are currently waiting for equipment to be available, and then they'll go to the outfitter for the installation of the final equipment to put them on the road. As far as the charter and code, I think the city attorney is going to speak a little bit to, we had talked about the possible code revisions for the city attorney function, and I know Jay's going to speak a little bit about that under his legal report later this evening. Let's see. No update on Robertsville Road, still working through the bankruptcy and the claim against the performance bond. Stormwater easements, still waiting on a couple of those. Have had some conversations with Carroll County Resource Management as far as the need for a grading permit and how to get through that process, since we didn't actually go through any kind of site plan process with the county. So we're on track to get our grading permit for that project, and once we get the last signatures for the easements, we'll go ahead and advertise it. FY24 sewer rehabilitation, we had a meeting with CDM Smith on the 22nd. The 90% design is complete, and we actually just advertised for bids today. Attorney Gullo has been helping with locating deeds of easements for the properties, in particular where we have conflicts with where the sewer line is, and improvements on the property that are going to be in the way of the construction. So Public Works has made contact with, or attempted to make contact with a couple of those, and made contact with at least one of them. So we're having those conversations now. But we are on target for bids to be awarded in September. So we'll see how many come in. I know we've already gotten one person requesting the bid packet, and it just went out today, so that's optimistic. So let's see. A couple other items, just in general, a quick update. The FY25 capital improvement program was updated to move the splash pad back a couple years like we talked about, and that's now available out on the city's website. The line painting on Robertsville Road that was talked about last month has been completed. Let's see. And I think that's about it for right now. So I'll have more comments as we get through the agenda a little bit later. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Excuse me. Councilman Foster and I had had a conversation about this. A citizen reached out that was involved with the sewer backup on East Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And she's, I guess, happy enough with what our Public Works guys have done, but she's curious about what else can be done to kind of let people know, just to kind of give a backstory here. The sewer issues were essentially caused by grease, which is easy to blame on the businesses, but apparently we have issues all throughout the city that have nothing to do with the businesses, that have to do with residents putting grease down their sink drains, which then causes issues, and then they have to clean it out. All she was asking is there some way that we can make it public notice somehow to let people know that putting grease down your drain is not a good idea. It's not something you're supposed to do. There's lots of other options, and just to get that information out.
Yeah, so we've been kind of looking around at other towns and communities, and there are a couple different, I'll say, like flyers or informational pieces out there that we're going to share via our social media, and maybe we'll push notifications out through the Taneytown Connect app, as well as putting things on our website, just kind of best practices. Mm-hmm. But that's very true. Between grease and the so-called flushable wipes, mm-hmm. are the major contributors. You know, I mean, certainly there are backups where there's a hard object that somehow gets into the system. But usually it's the buildup of grease and those wipes that causes a lot of problems for us.
Right, and I think a lot of times it just comes from not understanding and just doing what their parents and grandparents have done in years past and don't understand the damage that it does.
Right.
But I do feel for those people down there who literally had the sewage back up into their houses.
Yes.
Twice,
Which
right?
is really bad.
In recent weeks, yes. So,
Is the line noticeably flatter, less slope in that area?
I couldn't tell you that tonight, but I will find out about it.
Okay. And do we know if that's an older line? Is that
That's,
terracotta?
that
Is
I think was rehabilitated during streetscape.
Okay.
And the guys have cleaned it quite a few times. So it's
And
it's not-
we've cleaned it more frequently than other areas in the city. And,
And
you know,
going
right
forward,
now,
we-
the plan is that we're going to clean it, you know, even more frequently
Right.
so that we can avoid that. But we're also planning to reach out to the, you know, upstream food service businesses. You know, and again, it's an assumption, you know, but when you figure that the majority of the food service businesses in the city are upstream of that particular location, you know, it very well could be that that's where the line maybe flattens a little bit and, you know, that's
Where
where,
it congeals and.
yeah.
And I'm sure it's an
So-
attributing factor, but I think
Right,
that, in
but-
speaking to them, they said
but
that
it
it is a
could be-
citywide
right.
issue, like that there are trap areas where
Yes.
they do regularly have to clean grease
Yes,
out.
and we do periodically jet and televise, you know, around the system. We try to do a third of the city each year. And I know we've had some conversations about whether to invest in our televising equipment or whether to consider outsourcing and bring in a company that can just, you know, go at it and televise the whole city, you know, every other year or every 3 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we do make an effort to go around, you know, clean and televise lines so that within 3 years, you know, the plan is within 3 years, we've gone through the whole city. And that also helps keep our insurance rates reasonable because we're doing that proactive step to keep the lines clear and monitor the lines. But, you know, as evidenced with this backup, you know, that frequency isn't enough in some areas of the city.
Okay. Well, that's it. I think it'd just be, I think she would appreciate it very much if we were able to just get that worked out.
Just another note on that, the city code does specify under the illicit discharges section, you know, there's a certain threshold of how many parts per million, you know, of, I think it's fats, oils, and grease. Some, you know, areas refer to it as FOG, F-O-G, for those. And, you know, that it's not a really, my understanding is that it's really not a very high threshold. You know, so the average, you know, you may pour the bacon grease, you know, into a jar and then wash your pan. Well, there's still going to be residual grease that's going down the drain. And, you know, that in itself could technically be a violation. But the ability to go out and measure sewage flow from an individual property, you know, to do those kind of testing is unrealistic, really.
Well, knowledge is power, so if they don't know yet, then it would help if we
Yeah,
could at least
right,
let
so
them
some
know.
education.
Right.
Have those residents had that same the same residents had the same problem before?
Yeah.
So
in
it's,
one
so it's
section.
at that,
Yes.
so we've identified a point, so
Yes.
now it's a question of
But
source.
there's a lot
Yeah,
that
but you
feeds
don't
into
know
it
where it's
apparently.
coming from.
Now it's a matter of identifying source, and that's the hard part.
Right.
Further comments,
It is
questions?
scheduled to be cleaned every, I think Kevin wants it done every 2 months at this point, just to make sure that it stays clean.
Further comments, questions, concerns by council regarding city manager report?
Not on the city manager report, but I do have a question on the economic development report. And Mr. Mishi, maybe you can answer this. Received 11 applications from 8 businesses for the CBIP and announced awards. When were those awards announced, and could you tell us what businesses got awards?
Yeah.
If you, certainly.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I should say, announce them to the businesses. I'm hopeful that the mayor will make a statement that the news folks will pick up. And it was a misreport. There are 10 applications that came in rather than 11. 52 East Baltimore Street, 22 East Baltimore Street, 10 West Baltimore Street, 6 Frederick Street, 1 York Street, and 17 West Baltimore Street were awarded.
Thank you.
Sounds good, thank you.
And there'll be, are you gonna make an announcement on that, or is something
Yeah,
more
once
public?
it's-
I was just curious, because the way it read, it like an announcement
sure.
been made. and
No, I apologize.
I apologize, I didn't realize.
No,
that.
I should
Last-
have said,
No, okay,
the people were contacted.
last Friday, right? Is when we,
Yep.
yep.
Thank you.
Department reports, Jim, do you have anything to add on department reports?
Now, unless there were questions.
Comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, proceeding forward, legal report, Jay?
Good evening, everybody. I have a few things to talk about tonight. The first is back to our PFAS settlement. As you know, we've reached 2 settlements in our lawsuit so far with the big polluters, that would be 3M and the DuPont people. And as I told you, there would be other settlements that wouldn't be as big. They're still big, but they're not as big as those. These settlements are in the billions of dollars that we're talking about still. And so the new settlements are coming out with Tyco and BASF. Those 2 companies also use the PFAS chemical in their product, which has been in the groundwater. So the settlement offer has been, and of course, it's not just us. For anybody that's watching and doesn't understand, it's a large class action group. What we have to decide about our settlement is whether or not we want to participate in the settlement. And we have to make that decision by the middle of August. Obviously, my thought is we're going to want to participate in the settlement because we're not going to bring an independent suit against BASF or Tyco. We have joined this entire crusade in hopes of riding the class action to get what the citizens of Taneytown are due for the polluted water that could happen to them. So on Monday, I'm going to ask during my legal report that you just pass a vote, whether it's by unanimous consent or not, to stay in the settlement class. So, any questions on that? There's no thought of money. I mean, that's not. We don't know what we would get, but the settlement is obviously more than we're going to get if we didn't participate. Okay, that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 came out of the Planning Commission regarding an outstanding project, George's on York. And as you know, one of the principals of George's on York is Councilman Tillman. So I told the Planning Commission, since Councilman Tillman is the liaison to the Planning Commission, in order to make this as transparent and as less comfortable or more comfortable for everybody, I would bring this up. The issue that we have is a very simple one. There's a public works agreement that is outstanding for when George's on York was actually converted to the bed and breakfast operation. It had a certain amount of water usage that was calculated to be used, and it had a certain amount of EDUs and benefit assessment fees that would be paid. Since that time, the water usage has been audited, and I don't have that data. That's not what we're about tonight. But the water usage has been audited, and it appears that if it's not close to what was estimated, it's going to be a little bit more, a little bit less. So the issue that we're going to have is we need to either amend the public works agreement to make it accurate and then collect the proper amount of fees. This seems odd, and the only reason it's odd is because there's a council person involved. All of our public works agreements that we have now with any developer that does this type of thing has a provision that talks about, they don't call it an audit, but they talk about an estimate of water usage, and then because we don't know what it'll be, then a period of time that follows where everybody monitors the water, and then the benefit assessment that was paid can be adjusted up or down. So I wanted to bring that from the Planning Commission to you all, because you all will be the ones that will need to make the amendment to the PWA, and if there is one that's needed. So that you have to go forward with. And of course, when we deal with that, we'll announce the fact that there could be a conflict, and that way we have no problem with our transparency. Questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, my next issue deals with ongoing situation regarding the city's campaign finance rule. You know, we have campaign finance legislation in our code that requires when candidates raise money and spend money for our office, they need to fill out the forms. The Ethics Commission gets involved. And this has been, and when it was set up, is, I'll call it seasonal, right? It's campaign season. You know that you run every 2 years in May. And if you back that off, campaign season might be, you know, February through May. And that's when the planning or the Ethics Commission and Election Board all take their lead to do their work. It appears, as we talked about in the last couple meetings, that some people want to get out ahead of things and they want to be candidates now. And we said that we do not have the forms ready, and you all did not direct that we create forms because of basically creating a year-round campaign election cycle, which is a distraction. We do this during election season. But one of the things that is coming up is that there are campaign signs, there's possibly campaign fundraisers. Obviously, the spirit of the law you passed was to track income and expense. So anything that's spent on a campaign, anything that's brought in on a campaign. And the hitch is, how do you do that if you're not an official candidate? Because the code right now says that you have to do this if you're a candidate. And we're saying you can't be a candidate until you fill out the forms, and the Ethics Commission and Election Board say you are, which isn't till next year, 2025. So Clara and the city manager and I are going to sit down and figure out a possible code change that'll do something maybe to the effect of, when you file your first campaign finance report, when you are an official candidate, you will have to account for anything you received and anything you spent prior to becoming an official candidate. And that should really solve the problem. But we have to figure out the details on that. But I wanted to bring it to your attention because I know there's Clara's getting inquiries on that. Next item, Dan Dennis has worked hard to create a social media policy for the city. It is on my desk to be reviewed. And once it gets reviewed, I'm sure we'll have an internal meeting about the implications. What the goal was, and I know that city manager has pushed for this, is an umbrella policy that affects the whole city. You know, how are we going to deal with social media? And then how do we deal with maybe on a department level type of thing? So that at least has been done. I wanted to give kudos for Dan and the team that put that together, and we'll be working on that. Next item. There has been a request by our auditor. It was made to the city manager, so if you have any details about that. But the auditor has requested that we release some legal opinions to them. And these legal opinions are regarding the issue around the budget amendment that we dealt with. You started dealing with it in January, and you know it didn't pass. It was brought up again. So that is budget amendment. I think it was number 3. And there were some legal opinions about that. And as you know, we just can't release legal opinions because it's protected by attorney-client privilege. In this situation, we have 2 legal opinions. You have one from me, and you have one from the special city attorney you hired, Kevin Best. So the request that you're going to have to talk about on Monday is whether or not you want to release one of them, both of them, and we're going to read through them to highlight that for you before Monday. But the issue you have to decide is, are you going to waive the attorney-client privilege and release that to the auditor? So you're meeting the auditor's request. That's the positive. The negative is, once you waive the privilege as to that, it's waived. It's waived. It's not like it's just waived to the auditor. Once it goes outside the attorney-client relationship, it is waived completely. So therefore, if it passes from the auditor, it could be referenced. It could be done anything with the audit report. It could eventually be public. So we're going to work on that as well this week. I have a meeting with the city manager to talk about which opinion we would release. Does the opinion need to be redacted? And then we'll give you another update on Monday to tell you this is what we're thinking about and whether you want to do it or not. I don't know if Jim, if you have anything that you need to follow up on the why they want this, but I'm sure they're interested because I know they were involved in the advice that was given along with the legal advice. So I haven't talked to them, and maybe that's something we would do to find out whether they're curious as auditors or whether this is actually part of the auditing process and they're more than just curious. That might relate to whether we release it or not.
Is that something that would require a closed session to discuss?
It could require a closed session if you wanted to talk about the merits of it. If you decide you don't want to talk about the merits of it and talk about it in generalities, it would require a vote. So when we can do that in closed session as well. So.
Right.
Okay, if there's nothing on that, then the last issue I wanted to follow up is the outstanding issue about the charter and code changes that we put a little footnote on every meeting saying they're being reviewed, they're being reviewed. So the city manager and I talked about where this was left off. And if you recall the charter code, it was really a code change. We're lumping everything in together, but it doesn't really matter how you label it, it's the same amount of work. The code change was related to the city attorney's position, and this was something that was introduced probably last October. It had a lot of issue with it in November, and it didn't really go anywhere past that. It was initially started out with who can hire the city attorney and then who fires the city attorney. And then you remember, of course, as well as I do, all the intermeeting drama about the contract and how a contract for the city attorney is what you operate under right now. And so here's the the brass tacks of that whole situation. What you did or tried to do in October and November is really spoiled now. You have a rule in your charter that says things have to be done in a timely manner. There's a certain amount of time where you have to introduce something and pass it, and that is long past with them. So if there is anything you want to do to address this situation, we would be starting again. Of course, we can pull out the old one and go from that. If you pulled out the old one, it would need a little bit of tweaking. It really doesn't reflect exactly what you're talking about because obviously the city attorney is not an employee of the town, just like the auditor and the engineer. They're all positions of the town, but they are all contracted. And so the question would be, maybe we add language to do whatever it is you want to do with those positions, but talk about like something, for the example, saying, or by contract, something like that. So it's in there. It's probably not necessary at all at this point in time. I think we've had a lot of ground and chewed that one up. But if there is any desire to move forward, we would basically start with the old one and go from there. And if there's any other things that we'd want to do, that was the only one that I was tasked with looking at, because I think that's the only one that was pending.
I think that there was a code revision that was authored and was put out there, I believe in October. And then following on to that was a charter revision to memorialize the city attorney position in charter because it does not exist at all there. And to kind of equate that with auditor and engineer or whatever, I don't remember the exact
Would have
language.
been clerk and treasurer.
Clerk and
'cause
treasurer, yeah,
auditor-
clerk and treasurer, I think, are actually, yeah, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there were two separate pieces.
Correct.
Okay,
And that's what I guess that when you look at it all together, what you're having, what we would have to have a discussion with is, do you want the city attorney's position to be different than the position? Because the city attorney is listed as an officer along with the engineer and the auditor in that section of your code. The auditor and the engineer and the city attorney don't appear in the charter at all.
correct.
So the question is, are all of them going to be charter positions or just some? And how do you want to deal with those charter positions? Because obviously you're not going to hire anybody to do that internally. It would say by contract. So pulling out all that stuff, Councilman Tillman, it doesn't really tell exactly what you want to accomplish. And I think that we need to have a discussion about where it is you want to go and how that fits in.
Can I also interject? I think that in addition to that, I think we should also look into further charter changes as far as looking back to what happened on the July 3rd situation. I felt like we had somebody who really created an issue with several of our employees, and they used that situation and their relationship with the mayor to threaten these employees who felt like they were really put in a bad position. I still want to see the scenario where firings don't happen by any one person. So, well, I say that. I would like to see any capability for firing of any employee to be laid at the city manager's feet, who is then kind of held in check with the entire council. So I would still like to see how we can accomplish that, just so that there isn't any situations where our employees feel like they don't have the safety of, you know, that situation. Like they were nervous for their jobs because somebody was threatening them with a relationship.
So off the top of my head, I guess if we drill down on what we're talking about, the charter is clear that the rank and file employees report to the city manager already. So that we're not, when we say employees, we're not really talking about the rank and file employees. We would be talking about department heads, as the charter is in its section under mayoral powers, deals with the mayor and his power to appoint and remove department heads. That would be the only, unless there's some other reference, that's the reference. So it
No,
wouldn't be
and- yeah.
employees in general, it would be department heads.
Right, the department heads.
Councilmember Fuller, could you please describe the relationship I have with this person? Since
Well-
you know more about it than I do, apparently.
I'm just going with what I was advised, was there were people threatening our employees because they are friends of yours and that they were gonna have you fire them. I'm not saying it happened. I'm just saying nobody should ever be put in that position at all, because I don't know what that relationship is. And if there comes a time where down the line, somebody holds something over somebody else's head, it should never just be a scenario at all. So when you include a whole body into the process, I just think that that's a much more transparent and a proper way to do things. Now, if somebody does something wrong as an employee, obviously the manager can handle the situation, and we have faith in that, because he's not going to willy-nilly fire people. If there comes a time where there's another situation, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to bring it before the council and argue that point. I don't see a problem with that.
Jim, question for you. Did you receive a report of someone being threatened that I was going to fire them because of somebody else? Because that's the first time hearing of it. And I spoke with individuals who have talked about this the entire day, and again, this is the first time hearing of something like that.
So
I know a city employee came up to me and said, hey, go get your friends under control, in which case I talked to you after that, which was that city employees shouldn't care who is my friend and who isn't my friend, they should just be doing their jobs. And same thing, the assumption that somebody is my friend, or the assumption that there's a relationship there, is really none of the council's business, is none of the employees' business. They need to focus on doing their jobs. Did you receive a report in regards to this?
I did receive reports that there were individuals who were using profanity and threatening city employees and volunteers at the July 3rd event.
With that specific scenario?
I can't say with certainty that that piece was included in the description.
I can say with certainty that I didn't.
There was trying to think how to properly phrase this. So there certainly was concern from the employee's perspective that because of interactions between you and some individuals throughout that evening, that there was some sort of relationship involved there. And the interactions with some of these folks and the city employees was such that they felt very uncomfortable. They felt like they were at risk because of trying to.
And just to check, this is the same issue where the person was misidentified as somebody else, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure. And that was by the same employees who are I guess, saying this.
Right. I mean, we're, I think, making some assumptions that we're all talking about the same thing here. But yes, there are employees that, that basically were, from the reports given to me, berated and, threatened in some manner. And certainly there was follow-up with, people saying that the city needed to fire people. And, and that's very concerning for people. And, I guess to kind of circle back to Councilwoman Fuller's point, that the concern is, I guess, that, there's one individual and, maybe even going beyond like the specific situation, I guess the concern is that, one person holds the fate of umpteen people in his or her hands.
For staff and administration, I mean, that's the whole point of the mayor position, essentially, is the administration of the city. Without the ability to circulate department heads, if you needed to change the vision or trajectory of the city, you basically wouldn't be able to accomplish the task of the mayor position. That's essentially what is.
Right. And certainly there are jurisdictions where when there's a new, a new administration after an election, they bring in a whole new, slate of department heads. I mean, that happens. I
mean, it's part of the process, it's part of the executive position.
Right. And that,
On a larger
that,
scale, but it doesn't have to be on a scale this small.
that is not something that
But
has
if there's a
typically
valid
happened.
reason for the
here.
change, then I think it can be brought before a council.
For most cities that have a mayor, department heads are under the executive privilege of appointing and dismissal. And for that specific reason, which is, again, to be able to, if you have a vision, you should be able to steer the administration in that vision.
Steering is one thing, running it off the road is something completely different.
The only one who's ever ran the city off the road is you, Councilmember.
That seems very hypocritical for you to say, but
I
that's fine.
appreciate that, but name an instance, I guess.
Then we
And vice
stick to
versa.
the matter at hand, please. I believe that we already have ordinance against retaliatory firings in code. And I think that that certainly is something that would have come under that. If somebody said, I'm good friends with the mayor, I'm gonna get him to fire, you're behind. And the mayor fires, they're behind, I think that that would be certainly a grounds for a suit and certainly grounds for action under charter and code. So I think that that already exists. And I don't know that we, I like to say that anecdotes make bad ordinances. And I think we ought to look, before we do something like that, we ought to look at what our current law says and try to work within that framework if we can.
Well, and that's why I asked for a conversation about it.
I'm
Because,
I'm
again,
certainly
we
happy to
didn't
have the
used to need
conversation.
a lot of rules and regulations and laws because people had common sense and ruled by morality. And I don't feel like that's where the world is anymore.
Jay, did you have anything else?
This was my report, I guess. And so the question, I guess my end of this is, if you want some city code or charter changes, maybe you all have the discussion about what it is. I'd be happy to give you examples, but I can't read your mind or do 5 different things. So if you come up with a consensus of what you want, you can work with Jim. Jim can tell me, and I'll be happy to do what it is. But right now, I don't really know what it is you want to do about any of this. So instead, every month saying, how are we going on this? We're not going anywhere until you all actually tell me this is the kind of theory that you want me to have. And if it's about making the city attorney a charter officer, I can do that. Do you want me to take it out of the code? Do you want me to take the other people out of the code? Are there other things you want to do? So it's kind of like, I guess the bottom line is this isn't really ready for prime time yet. And when you get it to that point, we can act on it pretty quick.
So just to try to wrap that going back one step, but try to wrap that up really quickly we should put that on the agenda for next month as a discussion in the workshop. And maybe come back to the table next month with suggestions, whether we want to make the charter change that was talked about last fall, or do we want to look at the ordinances, and if we want to keep that officer, the attorney, in line with the engineer and the auditor, then we need to maybe look at the missing pieces that are in the current enabling ordinances for those positions, to make sure that we can't, that processes are followed in hiring and in termination.
Any other comments, questions, concerns regarding the legal report from council? Hearing none, I'm going over to new business. First, we have the monthly financial report. Questions, comments, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm going to accounts payables. Questions, comments, concerns by council? Hearing none, proceeding down to speed camera discussion. Jim, would you like to lead on it?
Okay. So, well, the mayor brought this to my attention more recently, that there have been some complaints along the school area on Trevanian Road, speed complaints. I know we've done speed surveys there in the past and, focused enforcement, but it sounds like it continues to be an ongoing concern for citizens. And, within school zones, the city we do have the authority to create a speed camera program for speed camera enforcement, to actually issue citations from speed cameras. The city had talked about this many years ago when speed cameras were first enabled by state legislation, and at that point, the city opted not to really delve into it. Since that point, the technology has obviously evolved and become more affordable, and it sounds like the contracts with the equipment providers are not as, I'll say, onerous on the municipalities as they once were, with having to generate a certain revenue threshold and so on. So this discussion tonight really is just, are you interested in delving into it and considering you would need to pass enabling legislation to do that. So we would pass enabling legislation. We would formally establish school zones. I know there are existing signs, but just having signs posted isn't enough. We need to take a more formal action to do that. You can have school zones proximate to crosswalks, at least on state highways. So the possibility of doing something, say, near the Baumgartner crossing where we have the crossing guard position during school year, could be potentially considered a school zone also. So basically, we'd go through a process, complete an application with the Maryland Department of Transportation for one on 140, and let's see, revenue for speed cameras where it's uncontested reverts to the local jurisdiction. So we can use that to offset any expenses that we might incur, to have a program. Just from a quick look at some vendors that I looked at online after the mayor and I talked, it looks like pretty much the vendor will come out, do their study to see the extent of the problem, and if they feel like it warrants the investment of the equipment and installation and such, and then we could get into contract discussions with them at that point. But right now, we would just need to decide, is this something we want to explore or not? Do we want to go that route and potentially have speed cameras or not?
Is this something that, once we establish zones, that could be moved from one place in a zone to another place without too much difficulty? And, if we establish multiple zones through the city, is it something that would be portable enough that we could move it from this zone to that zone to that zone?
My understanding is yes, but there are certain parameters that would apply each time that you move it, as far as, warning periods and notification and things like that, with signage and so on. I did talk briefly with the chief about this, and I know he has some experience from his prior community, and I know he saw some success with the program, from his perspective, that it was a positive.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Jim, do you want anything tonight regarding it, to look into it further, or?
That's really up to you guys. It's something that we can do just with consensus because we're not formally adopting anything or not, just before we really spend a whole lot of time on it. I want to make sure that everybody's on board and wants to move forward with it.
Do you know what the state limitations are on offhand, or what the legal limitations are for us as opposed to, obviously, we have to get permission from State Highway if we want to do anything on Baltimore Street.
Right.
But if we want to do Trevanion Road, or, I don't know if Carnival Drive is close enough, or Grand Drive or whatever.
There are still limitations as to, I believe there's a limit to the time of day that the tickets, citations can be issued. It needs to be, within a certain window of the school day. And I believe also during the school year, the violation, I think, still needs to be 12 miles over the posted limit before you can issue a citation. So there's a lot of thresholds, I guess, that we would have to meet.
Okay.
And I think it may be to our advantage also, and maybe we want to defer this for a little bit. Perhaps we do another speed survey out there, collect some data, see, what the speeds really are, and then come back and report, in a month or two, if, the magnitude of the problem.
I think that's
know what
appropriate.
speeds really are.
Yeah. The camera that we have that can do the recording, speed recording now, is that on a trailer with a big sign that says speed limit?
No, we attach it to typically a speed limit sign. So it's not a trailer mounted, it's a smaller unit that we mount on the poles, existing poles. And we can either have it display the vehicle speed, or we can just mount it and just collect data.
I kind of think, because you get a little bit of Heisenberg uncertainty principle in that, when the act of collecting the data affects the data, because people see the camera, they slow down.
Right.
And so you don't get accurate data. So the question is, can we hide it behind a bush or something? And
Right, and if it's not turned on to display the speed, it's not as overt, I guess. And I think that you might get a more
you need to see
realistic.
it done both ways,
Yes.
and to see if that, if just the sign or the camera flashing your speed.
Right, I mean, certainly,
behavior.
people that are observant are gonna notice there's something, attached to that sign. But more people are gonna notice if their speed flashes at them.
I mean, if
So,
you're able to get it right around where that bend curves over that hill, I mean, you'll at least mainly capture the ones coming towards Antrim.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
As
I
you-
just-
as
I
you
mean,
go down the
I-
hill
yeah,
towards
as-
the-
As you're coming right over
What
that
the
hill.
statistical difference would be between people who see the sign and see the your speed thing and
Yeah,
slow down versus those who just
I know we've talked
buzz
about
on
that
through.
before.
Yeah. So, well, we can certainly, put that location in the rotation for the speed sign. I mean, it's a very well-used piece of equipment. It goes from neighborhood to neighborhood pretty regularly. So we'll gather some data and then report back in the next couple of months.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Next up, Main Street discussion. Jim, would you like to lead us off?
As you know, the Main Street Advisory Board Chairperson addressed council last month with kind of a quarterly update. And, among, in her presentation, there were a number of items that were asked of the council to consider. I know I reiterated a couple of those a couple weeks back. But really tonight, the kind of starting point for the discussion was some of those items. One of them we touched on very briefly with the ordinance that was talked about as far as the, waiving that open meetings requirement for the subcommittees was one of the items that was discussed. But really tonight is, that was the initial reason to have it on the agenda. We talked about possibly trying to do a joint meeting or something like that, so we could have a little more back and forth exchange with board members, but trying to coordinate that seemed a little daunting to figure out how to best make that productive. So, at this point, the chairperson gave you a list of things last month to contemplate that the board was looking for some direction or clarity on. I know we've had some challenges with the Main Street program, and I know a few months I've suggested that council members take a few minutes to watch some of the meetings and the interactions and some of the discussion points there. So I think, we have a lot of challenges with the Main Street program, the way we've been trying to get it up and running at this point. So really just kind of a discussion to see, which of those items that the chairperson brought up, how the council feels about those. If you'd like, I can kind of run through some of those, or, and Jamie, our Main Street manager, is here to also, participate and respond to anything that you may have this evening, but it's kind of open-ended, wherever you guys would like to start.
If you don't mind me asking a frank question, do you believe the Main Street program is working in its current form? Do you believe it can work in its current form?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
I will admit that since the members were appointed, I guess it was in December of 2022.
Yes.
We don't have the operating rules that the board was tasked with putting together. There's been a lot of, I guess, difficulty within the board to schedule things, and we're also without a budget. I had hoped that the board would maybe gel a little more quickly than they have and be able to adopt some operating rules and have a budget that we could have used to help inform the economic development budget as far as, what maybe could be directed towards Main Street. It just isn't moving forward like we had hoped.
And I know we've talked a bit about it. Is there any comments, questions, concerns from council that they want to bring up while we're talking about it?
No. Quiet please from the gallery. As you know, I live with this program in more senses than one. Because, not only do I live with one of the members of the committee, but I'm also a business owner in the Main Street District. And so all of this matters greatly to me. It is a large portion of my life and work right now. We have a great deal invested in our business and our property. And so this matters greatly to me personally, and it should matter greatly really to all of us. As you know, there's been, a great deal of dysfunction and rancor among the members of the board and the Main Street Manager, Economic Development Director. And I believe that, we may have reached a point of irreconcilable differences. I would agree with you that the Main Street Board is non-functional at this time, that we're not getting anything done. I think that we need to look at some major changes if we're going to take this project and this process forward. I learned a great deal here in the last week. I had a conversation with Christine McPherson, who is the head of the program at the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I got some good information, learned some things that frankly bothered me. So I'd like to go forward, and if you don't mind, it's kind of going to be a little bit of a long discussion, and I hope you don't mind if I monopolize this a little bit, but I have a good bit to talk about. One of the things that I didn't know exists, and I don't know if anyone on the Main Street Board knows exists, but there is an agreement that the city signs with the Department of Housing and Community Development And there's a lot of information in this agreement. One of the things that stands out to me the most, it talks about the financial stability of the Main Street community, crucial to achieving the program's mission. And DHCD strongly encourages implement a funding model of 1/3 from the local government, 1/3 from grants and foundations, and 1/3 from corporate and individual donors. That's hard to do if you don't know what your budget is going to be. And as you know, I spent a fair amount of time and effort earlier this year trying to figure out and learn what Main Street's budget and spending patterns and resources were. And I feel like I met with a stone wall, that information seemed to be very difficult to come by. And when that information did come out, it was incomplete. You know, certain people seem to want to sweep that under the rug, and so it kind of died for lack of interest, you know, but not on my end. One of the things that also struck me from this agreement of information to be submitted to DHCD, the Main Street community must submit the following by December 31st of each year. And letter B is the most recent end-of-year financial statements with detailed income sources. That's a question that I directly asked, and which it was information that I still have yet to receive. And there was a lot of discussion about how difficult that information would be to get, but as I read here, we are supposed to have that information on hand. This should have been, email me the report. But again, I still, 6 months after I first asked for this information, I still do not have it. One of the other things in the annual submittal to DHCD is an annual comprehensive work plan for the upcoming year with measurements of success and defined transformation or economic strategies. I have never seen anything. I've been involved with Main Street going back to 2018 when we first started in business here in town, and I've never seen anything that looks like that. So we are not functioning as a Main Street board in the way that the program envisions us to function. The sad thing is that members of the board have tried to get together on what we should be doing and work plans and measurements of success. And we can't even seem to have a meeting to talk about the operating rules for the committee. We've had 2 of those meetings canceled at the last moment, one with 35 minutes notice. You know, we can't even seem to have a meeting. So if this is where we are, you know, I think we need to make some changes. One of the other things that is in this agreement and that disturbed me from my discussion with Mrs. McPherson, specialist on-site visits. DHCD staff is available on request. Specialists are available based on need and as resources allow. I know that that question was asked of our Main Street manager to try to get someone to come out. The answer that I believe came back from that is, well, they're short on staff there and they can't send anybody. But according to Mrs. McPherson, the request was never made. One of the other things that DHCD provides is training. Board members are required to attend training offered by DHCD during the first year of their term of service. I found out from talking to Ms. McPherson that there's a training session tomorrow, but the board was never informed of that. How are they supposed to get training if no one's going to tell them that training is available? So those are, are some real issues. What I think we need to do moving forward, I believe we need to dissolve the current board completely and reconstruct it with a new Main Street manager and an entirely new board that may or may not involve some of the volunteers that had originally volunteered, for it. But that would be a discussion that would be for council to decide. But before we reconstruct this board, I believe we need to meet with the Main Street Maryland staff and talk about where we are, review our ordinance, review the proposed operating rules that have been out there but never approved and frankly never actually brought up for discussion in the meetings. We've got a board that's trying to accomplish things but without any kind of structure or direction. This is supposed to be grassroots and up from the bottom. This is not supposed to be a top-down bureaucracy. But it seems to be structured as a top-down bureaucracy in the way that it is functioning here in Taneytown. One of the things that we haven't done is to create a strategic plan for the downtown community. And this needs to be a separate plan. This is not something that will be part of the comprehensive plan that the Planning Commission is currently working on, but this will be something very, very specific to the downtown community and the downtown businesses. We may want to look at revising the boundaries. There are, some businesses that were left out of the boundaries the way they were originally constructed, and I think we ought to be able to relook at that, and I think that that's something that can be looked at. So that is where I am right now. We have got to get away from the dysfunction and the rancor. It's just, this benefits no one. So I am open to comments on that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Real quick for everyone, the agreement with DHCD that Councilman Tillman referenced, I had emailed that out to everyone on July 12th. So for those of you who do have your surfaces, if you wanted to take a look at what's in that agreement, it should be in that email.
May I add something?
Certainly.
The agreement that Councilman Tillman referenced, this is the first year that DHCD has issued them since, I believe, 2019. And so when we talk about year-end reports, I don't want you to think that there have been many years of year-end reports that we haven't been submitting. The agreement
Thank you for
is
that
just
clarification. I did not know that.
Yes,
Thank you.
this is a new agreement that was signed by the mayor. And I can supply the manager for Monday with a record of the meetings when I did talk about the board training. I don't want it to be thought that I didn't, because there are minutes and there are YouTube video meetings where we talked about the DHCD Main Street Board member trainings.
Thank you. And I know, Jim, we've talked a little bit about it, and I know you've talked with Attorney Golo on it. And again, I think what it really came down to is that we need to address at the code level. And I think that's what we kind of came back with. If you wanted to kind of go over what that would look like.
Sure. Yeah. So when we, a couple of years ago, I'm going to back up a little farther than that. So the city has been a Main Street community since, I believe, 2000. The program has had its ups and downs over the years, but it was never actually referenced in city code. Previous boards had adopted bylaws at some point. They functioned, they approved budgets, they spent money, they did projects and so on. again, some years things went well, some years there was very little activity, it's been kind of a roller coaster. But incorporating a chapter in our code is a relatively recent development. I don't have it right in front of me for the date of adoption, but it was, maybe 2021, something like
21, I
that.
think.
So unlike some other boards and commissions that either are guided by state code or by details within the city code, we left the Main Street chapter kind of open-ended. So we left it up to the board to create their own operating procedures. And we just included maybe 6 or 8 bullet points that we wanted to make sure those operating rules included. That may have been, I think it was well-intentioned, maybe to give the new board some autonomy and let them figure out, how they wanted to approach the program and what they wanted to see. But, looking back, that may have been asking too much for a group of volunteers that's going to get together, and again, most of our boards and commissions meet, generally once a month. And, maybe that was asking too much to not give better guardrails, so to speak, for the group. On the one hand, I like the idea of the group having some autonomy, and, ultimately, I think everyone would love to see the program become successful to the point that while the program requires an agreement between the Department of Housing and Community Development and the city, so the city will always be party to the Main Street program, the ideal would be that this group would function much more independent of the city and not be dependent on the city for financing and staffing and so on. And the idea of letting them develop their own operating procedures, I think was the vision, I think, was to kind of get them started on this path of becoming a more independent organization. But I think that, seeing the struggles that the board has had, in developing these things, and, maybe that was asking too much. So, if we were to kind of do a reset, maybe we should spell things out more clearly so that the board, so there aren't all these question marks for the board. What am I supposed to do? I don't feel like I, have the authority to do this, or I don't know what my
I'm
role
not
is
sure
supposed
it's a
to
question
be.
of guardrails as much as it is direction. You can put guardrails up and people can bounce back and forth going across the road and still not get anywhere. I don't believe that that the board was fully committed to a mission, to a process and to end results. It was not constructed in a way, and certainly not run in a way, to provide measurable results. And, when if you're not measuring your results and celebrating your successes, you're just spinning your wheels. And at this time, it's hard to see that there were any successes. We've had a couple of minor successes. A couple of small events. But you get 10 or 12 people. That's not what we're looking for. So. Right now, there's no communication. Board members are afraid to even email each other because they keep having that specter of open meetings hung over them. And it just, I just don't think I think it requires a wholesale change. I don't know that, I think that we need to get someone from the program to come back and talk to us about how we should structure to move forward. because our current structure is not working.
My recommendation, after talking with you, Jim, and after talking with Jay, would again be the repeal of the code. And would be, before we even go into another Main Street, would be bylaws in place. And I think actually it is appropriate to say guardrails, because the idea would be at least you're gonna make it to your target. Even if you're bouncing off the walls, you're eventually gonna get there. And the problem that we had here, I personally believe, was there was a lack of vision currently, the lack of the guardrails there to really direct them where they should be going. And that's why I think we do need to put them in place with bylaws before we even start a Main Street Committee again. So they don't have to because I mean, for instance, it was basically, in my opinion, from watching the meetings, I didn't see many ideas brought up. I saw people fighting. That was every meeting. And what it was people fighting about the past. It wasn't people fighting about where they should go in the present. It was about people fighting about the past the entire time. And then not only that, it was just a total, I'd say, a lack of respect for the entire Main Street Committee process. And I know that there's beef between Main Street Committee members and the Main Street Director, but they can't make that what every meeting's about. If they would have actually come up with genuine ideas, if they would have pressed the issues, if they would have actually moved forward, they could have accomplished more as a committee.
Well, I think that the people on the committee would tell you that there was resistance to trying to move forward. Again, what I observed primarily was a group trying to be a grassroots group meeting up against a top-down bureaucracy.
I observed committee members attacking volunteers on Facebook. I observed committee members messaging out to businesses around here to the point where they actually offended a whole newspaper organization.
What are you talking about?
What am I,
What are you talking about? That's ridiculous, man. You guys are gonna throw this board under the bus? The problem's sitting right there. That's the problem. Just skip to the rest of it so we can get to the comments.
that's not the problem, Mark.
It is the problem.
The problem was the
You
members,
haven't lived it.
I haven't lived it.
You want businesses down here, but you haven't lived it. You didn't even show up to one goddamn project.
For the Main Street
You showed
ones?
up late, bro.
For the Main Street
You
ones?
showed up late.
Excuse me, Mayor, can you have them please come to the podium to
If you'd like,
speak?
please come to the podium and speak. Because I know what I did witness. Again, I witnessed committee members attacking volunteers. I witnessed committee members reaching out to newspaper organizations and then sending curse words to board chairs. I witnessed total dysfunction. I witnessed committee members leaving the committee.
There's some reason for that, because there was complete lack of respect for process. I know exactly what you're talking about, and there was complete lack of respect for process there, where the chairman of the board met with a local business in talking about the discussion. We talked about the discussion on the Taneytown record, and the promotions chair tried to set up a meeting with that business and had the meeting set up, and then that person met with the board chair and had that discussion with the board chair 3 weeks before the meeting that was already set up with that committee, and no one said anything to anyone about it. And it was a complete lack of respect for that process. Again, there was a meeting, and if that person hadn't sent out a message to all of the members that were supposed to, members of that subcommittee that were supposed to come to the meeting, to find out, oh, yeah, I had that meeting with the board chair, or, with your chairman 3 weeks ago, I'm not coming. Again, it's the lack of consideration for people and the wasting of people's time. And wasting of people's effort. People get mad about that kind of thing. People get mad when they come back from visiting their grandchild a day early to go to a meeting that gets canceled 35 minutes before it happens. People get angry about that. And that's
Are you referring to the meeting about the bylaws that
Yes,
that one
yes.
individual, was that the meeting where one individual was not going to make the meeting for the bylaws?
It was all fine. Nobody ever asked anybody on the board if we could still meet.
I guarantee if they still would have met, the complaint then would be that they met and did bylaws without a member of the committee.
No,
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 absolutely not.
because that person had already posted all of their notes to the Google Docs that everyone was supposed to refer to. Her material was already available, and frankly,
The Main Street manager was aware that that person wasn't going to be there on Monday, and the meeting was set up for 5:30 on Thursday, and they cancel it at 4:55 on Thursday? Really? People changed their schedule. People had changed what they had done to be at that meeting. And so it comes across as an excuse not to talk about the operating rules.
because that's the second time that happened for
That meeting.
They had almost a year to talk about operating procedure rules.
And yet it still doesn't get brought up. And they can bring it up. You realize members of the board can bring it up. And I know they know that.
I'm done.
Okay, now
It's not public comment time.
I am ready to speak.
Well, it's not
Because I'm
public comment
hearing lies, and I'm hearing
When
things
it's
said
public,
about
when it's public
my
comment
board and my
time, you can
work
come back up.
that you can all,
When it's public comment time, you can come back up.
then let's do it.
We're still
I'm
going through
ready.
it. Please sit down. Not there, ma'am. You haven't been asked your purse there. Please return to the gallery.
Yeah, you too.
Please return to the gallery.
Think I'm mad now?
and this is,
This is what you read. This is your administration, and this is what you read. You have set the tone. Thank you very much.
and this,
I'm not going to go ahead and prove the church's purpose, we can go off to the rest of it. 'Cause
We're still on the Main Street discussion. We're still on the Main Street discussion. Please,
Get to it, man. Get to it.
please stop. No more. Wait.
Yeah,
till-
you
wait
know
till public
what?
comment.
Let me say something. I've listened to this conversation, listened to the both sides, the pros and the cons, and the only thing I agree with is that it is dysfunctional. I don't know that the proposal to retrain the committee is what we need to do. I think what we need to do is exude stronger leadership from the city in helping the Main Street Committee get together and gel to become a team, to be a functioning body. And I think that has to come from us. That has to come from our leadership. We're talking about volunteers here that want to make things better for the businesses downtown and for the city generally. And I think that's important, but they can't do it on their own. I think we need to, but that's why we have a Main Street manager. That's why we have somebody that directs the or points the direction for this committee to go. And I think that's been lacking very severely. And we've expected this committee to come up with all these grand ideas and move in this unified direction where there really has been no direction from us in which way they should move. And I think that's what the Main Street manager's job is. And I think that's a part of this piece we're not addressing at all. And I think that we're not going to accomplish anything until we do.
May I say something, Mr. Mayor?
So I agree with Jim. I tried to speak before, but was interrupted. I think that we need to do what the mayor said and stop arguing about it because that's getting us nowhere. We need to go back to the code and we need to start over.
And I agree. I think again, I think the city can lend more direction to the Main Street Committee by making sure those bylaws are in place before they even meet again, by making sure that the new code is structured in a way that provides guidance for each one of the subcommittees and what they should be working on, so nobody's overlapping each other. Again, that is just my recommendation. I'm not sure if any of the other council members have any comments, questions regarding it. Misha, if you had, I know you had additional comment there.
I was going to agree with Mayor Pro Tem McCarron. I think that when we wrote the ordinance, we were responding to a desire for grassroots as opposed to top down. And I think that we ended up not providing direction, like the Mayor Pro Tem says, in an effort to let the stakeholders sort of decide where things go. And it turns out that without that direction from the city, that it went nowhere. And so as disappointing as it is to see the sort of the ordinance that I feel like I did a lot of work on with Attorney Gullo repealed, I think that that it is insufficient to achieve, the goals of Main Street America or of the priorities of the mayor and council.
Thank you.
I disagree with that statement, and the city shouldn't be setting this direction. The program sets goals and direction for what they want to see, and what they're, and really provides the structure. The structure is already there. The problem is that we've introduced our own and have kind of built a mini bureaucracy around it to the point where nothing gets done. We shouldn't be setting, if this is truly grassroots, the direction should come from the businesses, should come from the interested parties. It shouldn't come from the city. We shouldn't be creating this top-down bureaucracy that says, well, we're going to fix this by having sidewalk chalk on second Saturdays. Not that I'm insulting the program. I'm just saying that to say that kind of a thing is going to fix the problem is head in the sand kind of thinking.
I think that came about because nothing was moving forward. And I think that's why when we're talking about setting the boundaries and setting the guardrails here at the city.
And I would
it's so
agree,
it can proceed
except that kind of came down as an edict from on high and not as, hey, how about we do this? Because I don't ever recall that being something that was discussed in a meeting and brought up and suggested. That kind of came down.
But I will say it's one of the only events that I've seen besides.
Well,
the
it's the only,
cleanup,
it's the only
which is
thing
really
that's
good,
been planned.
that
It's the only
has,
thing that's happened.
and that's what I'm saying is that we
Well-
retried the grassroots. We tried the, hey, free reign. This is your committee. Make of it what you will.
But
and
see, I
it
don't think
didn't-
that
and it
ever
didn't
actually
work.
happened. I don't think that they ever, it's like they gathered up. I mean, you're talking about an organization that was appointed in December of 2022 and met once in early 23 and then didn't meet again for 8 or 9 months. And so where's the responsibility for that? And then when they did finally meet and said, oh yeah, we better go they just started trying to do things without having set that structure up on the internally first.
And I think
And
that's what
I've
we're saying.
said that before. I've said that sitting right here before, that that they seem like they put their carts out in front of their horses and tried to head off and get things done, and everybody went like scattered like bugs when you turn on the light.
I think you're actually stating why we're saying that we should put those guardrails in. So it keeps them in that lane. We're not trying to set their ultimate vision of where they need to go or anything like that. We're just providing the foundation of, hey, just move.
And I'm not necessarily disagreeing that we shouldn't provide them with a solid foundation. I think that's part and parcel of it. But I think that we shouldn't try to do this in a vacuum. I think that we need to bring in, the folks from DHCD and let's talk about what the program should be and what it should be doing. But in the meantime, let's not, there's nothing to be gained by continuing with the program as it is.
I agree. And that, again, I think when we Under the recommendation, if council does it, on the repeal and the ordinance, I do agree. I think we should bring people in that know the overall arcane foundation of what a Main Street program should be. And that should be a conversation with our economic development director. And that should be a conversation with council as well. And I think council should be involved with the economic development director in crafting the new Main Street ordinance that also provides the bylaws that are already in place for those guardrails so they can move forward. But that is just my recommendation. I know I've talked with Jim about it. I know Jim's talked with Attorney Gullo about it. And I'm sure we'll, is there anything in particular you want tonight, Jim, in regards to it all?
We can certainly, make a decision Monday night. I can't imagine that there's not going to be significant public comment at the end of the meeting on the topic, so we need to listen to that. And, it certainly is not my intent to, throw anybody under the bus in a public meeting or in general. But I think we can all agree that what we have now is not working. And to be frank, I think there's blame to go around on all parties, but that's not, I want to try to figure out how to make something work. And, I think could the city have done a better job in some areas? Absolutely. But I also think that, there are, and we have an agenda item coming up, Taneytown record discussion. And just to use this maybe as an example of how things can kind of get off track. So the code that we adopted under that short list of things that we wanted the Main Street Advisory Board to incorporate into their operating procedures was a schedule of publication for the Taneytown record. That has kind of somehow morphed into a much larger discussion about who controls the Taneytown record. Should there be a Taneytown record? Should there be a magazine? Should there be a Taneytown news journal, published by someone outside of the city? And that really was not what the intent of the code, I think, was. It was just, how often should we publish it? But there were, that had sort of blown up into a much larger discussion about what Main Street wanted to do with that publication. And that really wasn't the intent of what was in the code, I think. But it became a very large issue that, even this evening it came up. And it really didn't need to be, I guess. So I think there have been, some battles fought that maybe really didn't need to be waged. But again, I think we all fell short in this effort.
Well, and here again, we'll, and we can, that's another item down on the agenda to talk about it. And I don't want to jump the agenda, except to say that, in February and March of this year, a plan was authored. I don't know who has seen this plan. I know that it went to members of the board. I don't know how far it got beyond that. But there was a plan that was authored, but never seemed to warrant discussion at meetings. And every time it got brought up, it got passed over or brushed over or not talked about. So, that's kind of where this falls apart as much as anything. And frankly, I think that had to do with personalities. And to me, which is part of the reason that I think we need to reconstruct the board.
And I agree in that regard. Was the plan that was circulated, is that the one, was that circulated in the committee?
I don't know, and when Sharon comes to the microphone later on, you can ask her that
Okay,
question.
I was just wondering, because I know, if it is shared within the committee, they can bring it up. They are.
And it was on the agenda. I believe it was on the agenda at different times, but apparently the only time I ever saw in any of the meetings that I watched, and I've watched a number of them, the last time that it was actually brought up, it was on the agenda, and then Mr. Mishi says, "Oh yeah, that's right. We need to publish one this month because we've got to get the city's water quality report out." And that hit some people really the wrong way, which was that it was like the burden had been put on the Main Street community to put out the city's water quality report. You know, that's not what Main Street and to me what the record is supposed to be about. I think over the course of years, and this, you know, way predates Jay Mishi, is that it became the Taneytown record in and of itself became simply a mouthpiece for the mayor. Not that,
No.
I'm not talking about you so much, but certainly much more for Brad than it was.
And just to say that is why I came to the April meeting. It wasn't to ask them, you know, hey, you guys need to do the paper. It was to ask them, what do you want to see in the paper? You know, is there articles you want to see? Do you want to see your events in there? And that was the opportunity we were giving them, is to really post out their events in that newspaper. But it was basically said, well, we want control of the newspaper. It's not your newspaper. You shouldn't even be talking about publishing it. But in actuality, when I came in April to the board and talked about it, I was asking for suggestions of what they wanted to see in it. And then when I followed up with the Economic Development Director, Mish, to ask again in May, you know, hey, I still haven't received anything back, you know, what would you guys like to see? You were asking. I was there at the meeting, at the Main Street meeting. I asked, and maybe I'm misremembering. Was I there at the April meeting, staff?
I think that the video shows that you were.
I think the video would show that I was there. And I did ask it. And that's why I was shocked when it comes to May, and the committee's acting like that's the first time they ever heard about this newspaper and the ask of what they'd like to see in it. Because that was not the first ask. The first ask was in April. And what seemed to me throughout the entire time of the committee is the committee was too busy picking fights with the city than to focus on actually just moving their committee forward. And that's how I felt the entire time. It was constant fires that were being put up against the city for no reason, when we're actually trying to facilitate and help their committee.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's a very fair statement to make, because certainly your economic development director certainly put up plenty of bars in front of the committee, and did so often in a way that was less than genteel, and you know, I will just say that that's a two-way street, and it has always been a two-way street, which is why I think that any reconstruction needs to include a different Main Street manager, because I believe that if you go back and because it's human nature, Jay, I'm not picking on you particularly, but people will go back to what they were doing, and I think that that's the wrong approach.
But the problem I'll iterate is that they weren't just attacking the Main Street manager. They weren't just unhappy with him. They started attacking volunteers. They started attacking people who
When
weren't
you
even
say
part of
that,
this whole
what
process.
volunteers, who are you talking about?
I'm not going to go into too much, but it was a Facebook argument. I shouldn't even say really an argument, but hey, you didn't advertise my event. Where were you at this event? And that was a subcommittee volunteer that they were talking to. And that's the thing we need for our committees is volunteers. I don't know.
But again, that argument probably stemmed from a lack of communication within the board and between the board and the Main Street manager. I don't think that you would disagree that communication has been an issue. Jay, would you?
I didn't know that needed a response. I don't disagree that communication's been an issue.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns from council?
Let me interject something just before we draw this to a close. You know, when I spoke a minute ago, I talked about leadership and the lack of leadership. And it's not the bureaucracy trickle down leadership that I'm talking about, but it's the leadership that the Main Street Maryland or the Main Street manager provides with the committee. And then that Main Street manager comes to council and say, hey, this is what our ideas are. Do we have your support? And that's the way it should work. And that's what's not working now. And I think that's the direction we need to go if we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. We certainly do need input from council on things that go on downtown. It's the heart of our city. We've got to be involved. But it'll work for the good of all if it comes from the Main Street manager as an advocate for the ideas brought forth by the Main Street Committee. And I think that's something we need to work toward.
The only thing I would say, and this would be something that we could then discuss at that discussion level when we get ready to work this forward, but that would be that one of the things that Main Street needs to be is a little more nimble, and one of the things that government is not is nimble. So I think to try to have to bring everything back to council for approval before they do anything, I think that's just a step back in the bureaucratic direction. And I think that it, there may be some reins that need to be put on things, but I think to try to manage that from the council level, I think is the wrong thing. I spent a lot of time when we were down at MML talking to mayors from other towns, talking to economic development directors from other towns, talking about how their main streets are set up and what they do and what they accomplish. It actually made me very sad to hear all of these other towns and the things that they've been able to accomplish. One town, for example, their Main Street Committee is their city council, and which makes them much more nimble. But they have a council apparently that everybody's pulling together and has a lot more agreement on the things that they do. In other places, other than the city paying the salary of the Main Street manager, the city stays completely out of it. And still other places, there are places where, the city does a lot more to financially back and move forward to try to help the Main Street Committee. So there are good models out there, some that will work here, some that won't work here. But I think that we need to study all of that before we pick up the reins and try to go again.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Cheney?
I just wanted to say that before we get lost in all of this, I think that, again, we're still arguing, which isn't getting us anywhere. But I don't want to undervalue the work that Mish has done, because he has done a lot of good work and we have had great events in this city. So I think that we need to also be careful whose toes we're stepping on or who we're talking about in a negative light in a public meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none.
I would like to just add a couple things maybe in closing and just hearing the discussion and the kind of point counterpoint. So this is just, it's quite a dilemma for me, because I've had conversations with individual board members, with I'd say the majority of the board members, and we have had really good conversations and everybody gets it. Everybody has good ideas. When I talk one-on-one with everybody, everybody understands, what we need to do. Everybody has, a vision that they want to pursue. And some of the committees have, done some very good work. And, even with maybe the board not functioning like we had hoped. But when we put everybody together, it's just not gelling. And, I know there are some, issues between various individuals and things that have developed, which is unfortunate and certainly makes it difficult to function as a group. But, the people are, I guess, everybody's got, some really strong ideas, and, I don't know what we can do, but at the same time, I'm hearing feedback that, the roles haven't been, defined, or the rules aren't in place, so, there's hesitation to move forward. But then I'm also hearing that the city needs to back off and not be heavy-handed in it. And, so really, from my perspective, I don't know what to tell Amish to do, because I'm hearing kind of conflicting perspectives on things. I'm hearing the city needs to relinquish control, get your hands out of it to, let the board get to work. But then I'm also hearing, I don't know quite what my role is. And I really don't know, I'm really torn on this, because I think, if we dictate everything, we're setting up a situation where, if we do, and we had conversations about this years ago before we adopted the code. We talked, at least in-house, okay, what do we want it to look like? Because the program had kind of gotten a little farther removed from the city's control than we were comfortable with. There were questions about things running through, that we didn't have the direct accounting through our accounting system because of the finances being through the community foundation, and that, we as a city didn't have the, detail in-house on everything. And, and there were questions about, should the meetings be open to the public or not, and it's like, well, it's not a city-appointed board, and we went back and forth on that. And in all those discussions leading up to the adoption of the chapter, it was, do we go the grassroots way, or do we do, as was mentioned, that some other towns do we just make the board, our elected officials? And, we opted to try to go the grassroots way.
I think you
Which
kind
I
of
think
ended up with
is what the program really is supposed to be. And
I think you ended up with kind of a hybrid that didn't put you in either place, and I
Yeah,
think that that's
yeah.
part of the problem. And you talk about the finances, and I hadn't really gone down that road very hard, but there are a lot of people out there who think that the Main Street finances have been used as a city slush fund. And absent anything concrete to tell people to the contrary, that belief is going to pervade. So, it shouldn't be this hard to try to do public good, and especially as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Volunteers should never feel like they've been insulted. They shouldn't feel like their opinions are don't matter, or that their work is not valued. And I think that we have come to a place where that's what's happened. And we can't move forward that way. So, all right, I'm now done. I've said enough.
Additional comments, questions, concerns from council? Hearing none, and proceeding forward. Approval of special event permit, St. Joseph's Catholic Church, Catholic Mass and Picnic, September 21st, 2024 at Memorial Park. Comments, questions, concerns from council?
Sounds lovely.
Hearing none, proceeding forward. Taneytown record discussion. Jim, would you like to lead us off?
Okay, so there's been a lot of discussion about this, and certainly it's been swirling in and out of Main Street conversation as well. So as you know, we haven't published a Taneytown record for many months. It had been previously, the role of the Economic Development Director to put the Taneytown record out several times a year. And the content has varied. We've had thin issues, we've had thick issues. We've gone from paying someone to do the layout to Director Mishi doing the layout in-house. But the paper was initially created as under the Main Street purview. There was a volunteer that offered to basically be the editor, and then Design Associates here on the square did the layout and the printing of it. And that didn't last terribly long, and then we started to pay the person who previously had volunteered, and ultimately Design Associates took over kind of that role of assembling it and kind of coordinating things along with the Economic Development Director. The way it was structured, Main Street businesses were given I believe a quarter page, a certain size ad for free in the Taneytown Record. Other businesses that wanted to advertise had to pay for it. The revenue generated through that advertising was funneled into the Main Street program. So on the surface, that looked like it was a very good fundraiser for Main Street, and it really was, but we weren't doing a full accounting of the costs of producing it. So we never really factored in the Economic Development Director's time, whether it was Nancy McCormick years ago or Jamie Ishii now. The number of hours that they would spend trying to get the content, tracking down, hey, Mr. Mayor, the deadline was yesterday for your, from the mayor's office, and trying to sell ads and then bill for ads. A lot of time and effort went into it. If you factored that in, it was really for the city, not, Main Street was benefiting from it, but the city was investing a lot of time and effort into it that wasn't really factored into the equation. So when you put all that together, it was really costing the city money to be doing it. It was really just basically donating more money to Main Street, which is fine, but I don't think that was really made clear in the past. So we kind of paused the Taneytown Record because, it was getting to be very time consuming and, wasn't generating the revenue that we had hoped. But also there was some talk about, okay, we're gonna kind of reinvent it and, we're gonna freshen it up. And, I think we may have put out one or two issues, since we said, okay, we're gonna change it up a little bit. And since then, we weren't getting the same level of ad revenue and so on. So we ceased publishing it. As you all know, we recently, when we mailed out our water quality report, we listed all the upcoming events and things like that, just to kind of get a little newslettery sort of thing out to people. But the question really is, for me, is do we want to go back to publishing something ourselves? Do we want to bring back the Taneytown Record as it still is essentially a city newsletter, for us to be publishing it. I mean, that's the point, is to get the city news and events and updates out to the public. And then we can, but to make it beyond just a newsletter, we can feature articles about local businesses or content that the community submits. We can sell advertisement and so on, like we used to. Whether that is, connected to Main Street or not is gonna be up to council. So we have that option. That's gonna, that's a pretty big commitment to do that. We could certainly revert to just a good old-fashioned, single sheet, 11 by 17, one-fold newsletter that goes out every other month or quarterly to get city news and events out to the public. In addition to what we do on social media and the app and the webpage and stuff. We certainly pay for postage and a lot less time and postage to put that together, but that's an option. Or we could basically, we could not do either of those, and the publisher of the Emmitsburg News Journal has expressed interest in doing a Taneytown version of the paper. They have offered to include a certain amount of content, from the city to go into their issue, every issue. But certainly, and while, I'm not questioning that, our information would not be published as submitted or anything like that, but the city certainly would be ceding some control of, that outlet to somebody on the outside world, if we were to do that. So, but the News Journal publisher is not interested in competing with the Taneytown Record because the Taneytown Record had been giving away free advertising. So that, I think, kind of frames the conversation as some of our options, but I do believe that we need to resume publishing something in a hard copy format to make available to the public. For as many people that used to say, oh, I line my bird cage with the Taneytown Record, or it goes right in the recycling bin, there are also people that really miss it. And not everybody is on social media. Not everybody has a smartphone to get updates through Taneytown Connect. Not everybody goes to the website. Some people still like that good old-fashioned piece of paper. And I think by stopping that, we've created a void in the community that I would like to fill.
I agree that it did create a void, and I'm one of those, very short-armed people that likes to have a piece of paper in front of me, as opposed to looking at it on a phone or on a computer screen, although those are not bad ways of getting information. But I think one of the things that you've hit on, one of the tenets in the agreement, the Main Street agreement, is that for cities over 5,000 people, that the Main Street manager is essentially a full-time job, and this is part of it. Being able to put those kinds of publications out, to do all of those things. From my understanding, this is not, Mr. Mishi's full-time job. He has other responsibilities. He has other interests. I know, in conversations that we've had that, your interests lie elsewhere and this is a chore. This has to be a labor of love, and this has to be something that you're committed to doing in terms of being the Main Street manager. It can't be a side job or something that you do because you have to. Which is part of the.
To clarify, you mean being the Main Street manager is not my interest, or making the Taneytown Record is not my interest?
I don't think that I don't think being the Main Street manager, I don't think that dealing with the small businesses and the ebb and flow of Main Street, I just from the conversations I've had with you, I don't think that that's where your interest lies. Now, maybe I'm wrong.
If that was the takeaway, then I misspoke. All of our 140 businesses are equally important to me, whether they are single-person businesses. For instance, I took the mayor to many of them on May 10th. I am committed to increasing the non-residential tax base and creating jobs. And the size of a business doesn't matter to me, and I certainly don't want any of the businesses watching to think that it does.
Do you have anything else, Councilman?
I will let the small businesses that are here speak to that themselves.
Taneytown Record discussion. I will say, again, I've said this before, I don't believe it's appropriate for the government to basically put out a newspaper. I believe a newsletter is kind of our obligation, which is to make people aware of events, the happenings of the city, but news should be left to people, journalists.
Right.
news
What was
reporters.
published was never the news. It was.
And
It was.
I'll tell you, that's what people wanted to frame it as. That's what people wanted was news from it. And again, that was the ask that I was getting from the general public. And I don't feel comfortable with the government being the one who provides that for them. That should be, again, either another public entity, another private entity, but it should not be the city government doing that. But I do believe a newsletter is appropriate with the events.
And I think that the two can be combined. I don't necessarily think that they are mutually exclusive. But I think it can be a cooperative effort, and I think maybe it should be. We shouldn't.
I don't agree.
So, but again, that's, And that may be part of the mechanism of how funding may work out for it, you know what I mean? Instead of money that you would spend putting out that newsletter, maybe that is funding that ends up going back to Main Street for them to do it as part of what they do. These are all things that could be discussed in a restructuring.
I guess, additional detail that predates some of the folks sitting up here. And there's been discussion about the Taneytown record. There have been people that have approached the city saying, well, where are the letters to the editor? Where, who vets the facts, and wanting to see it actually be more of a newspaper. And at the time, I recall the city was actually a little hesitant to say, well, it's not a newspaper, it's a newsletter. It's, news of the city. Because people had sort of, I don't know, I guess considered it over time, to be a local newspaper. And there was, criticism that, hey, where are the letters to the editor? How come I can't put my thing in there? And so on. And, there was actually some hesitation, I think, at the time to say, well, it's not a newspaper. It's the city's newsletter. It's a very robust newsletter, but it's news and stuff that the city wants to put out. But again, I think it, is above and beyond what's typically expected of a city or a town to put out.
Yeah, especially if you look at what the
I
other
mean,
towns.
and it was a nice product for a very long time, but it took a lot of time and effort and, of course, cost associated with it to do it.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council members? We'll probably just look for a consensus on what direction to go Monday, right?
May I say, I'm so sorry, Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor, may I say one more thing? After the President, Mayor, and Council took office, at some point, I began to put in bold in my economic development report the businesses that I visited that weren't in Main Street. And I can go back and check, but I believe that at one point, somebody on the council expressed concern that I was doing all of my business calls for Main Street businesses. And that's why I began bolding the ones that weren't in Main Street. So we can certainly go back and find out whose concern was that I was spending all my time on Main Street businesses.
Our point, but my point about what I said a few minutes ago, Jay, is that you have other duties and other interests and other things that you work on, that this is not your full-time vocation. Main Street is not your full-time vocation. And the intent of the program is for a city our size, that it be a full-time vocation for someone. And that's.
But that doesn't have anything to do with the paper. I guess
No,
that's where
but
I'm very confused.
well, it
because
does in a
nowhere-
sense.
Well, no, wait. Nowhere on here does it say that Main Street should be putting out a paper. So I think this is a completely separate discussion. This is about what do we as a city want to do to get the information out so that the Main Street can do something completely separate that serves their purpose. We're just looking for a way to put the news and information out there for the people who have been missing it since the last one in December or in the open-ended areas between. They don't care about the ins and outs of the Main Street Committee. They just want to know, phone numbers of who to reach and, what the calendar says and when this is going to happen and what the water report says. They want that information, and that's what they're reaching out and saying to us. So let's figure out what we're going to do with our information, and then we can let Main Street, once we figure that out, figure out how they want to get out their information. It's two completely separate things.
And I agree with Councilmember Fuller, it is two separate things. Main Street, if they want to go down that, if they go down that, route, they can. But we as a city, we have to figure out what we're going to put out, and that's what the city manager is also asking us is, he wants to start getting something out. Again, if you were to ask me, my suggestion is a newsletter that gets out our events, basic information. But if any other council members have any other ideas, suggestions on what this should look like going forward on the city's end. Any additional comments, questions, concerns from council? Hearing none, proceeding to public comment pertaining to agenda items. All you.
Paul Cluth. I'm both a resident and a Main Street business owner. And you've heard me speak at different sessions and Main Street board meetings. I really just wanted to make a general statement. I want to appeal to all the city council persons here tonight and online. We know that you have your specialty areas that you oversee, but with all that's going on with our Main Street and concerns, I wanted to ask each of you to, take a closer look and to stay on top of Main Street for a win-win situation. We have the opportunity to really move the city forward, for the benefit of all businesses in Taneytown. Now, when I say win-win, I'm talking not only a win for Main Street, as it is designated by the jurisdiction, but it needs to be a win-win, a win for the city, which represents the council members and city government, economic development, Main Street manager, if it's going to be part of the city. The third win needs to be for the citizens of Taneytown, the residents. And it also needs to be a win for all the businesses in Taneytown, because there's back and forth flow of economic growth and satisfaction that business owners can obtain. So I want you to look at this from a standpoint, full court press. Let's make Main Street and economic development churn like some of the other departments. Now, I want to compliment some of the other departments within the city. Parks and Rec really has their act together. They've got things going all the time. Look at all the great PR that comes out. You see the PR in the Facebook pages, you see the PR in Taneytown Connect, and also the Parks and Rec Facebook page. They really got their act together. My compliments to that individual who has that area. And when you think about some of our nonprofits in town, we've got some pretty good nonprofit organizations operating out of this city. We now have a really neat police department, just fabulous. And we know from longevity that even though Public Works needs a new facility desperately, they have done a great job of taking care of the needs of the citizens. Where we've been a little bit weak, and I don't put this on one particular individual necessarily, because it is a huge job. Economic development is huge. It involves so many macro, state, county, and local levels. It's too much for one person, and then of course you put on Main Street manager on top of that and publishing a newspaper. It's too much. I don't know what the solution is. I know that we have a lot of unhappy campers, businesses that are unhappy right now, and you might even hear about that later tonight. But we got to look at the big picture. Let's make Main Street something that is something we're proud of. And I don't say that from someone who owns a business in town. I mean, I want to see more visitors coming into the city, whatever way we can make it happen. There are challenges. We definitely have challenges, the way we're built, in the city, downtown. But we really all need to put our heads together, make this happen. Let's move forward. I mean, I'm just trying to be an inspiration, that something that we can all be proud of, and maybe we can get Main Street to churn like it did in the past. So that's all I really wanted to say. But I thank you for any efforts that you can contribute to solving our issues and so that everybody is a winner in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Public comment pertaining to agenda items.
Sharon Tillman, Main Street business owner, Main Street board member currently, at least for the next, 48 hours or so. I would like to address some of the comments that were made this evening on behalf of myself as a Main Street board member. I have been told by the Main Street chair that we're not allowed to speak on behalf of the entire board, so I will speak for myself. We've consistently asked for recent historical data on the financial implications of this board. We've been asked for income and expense accounts, information, and have not received any type of balance sheets, any type of information that would help us to plan for the future. It's very difficult to plan for the future when you don't know what's happened in the past. And when there is no transparency of how the money has come in and how the money has gone out, even to the point of knowing what, how can we talk about what we should do with the Taneytown record when we don't know what it costs? No one's ever told us that. We've asked, never gotten the information. But we just don't get any satisfactory answers. We were not even told about what the goals of the city were for Main Street. Had we known that the goal was to launch this into a grassroots effort, we could have at least done something with that. Nobody told us. We were just given bylaws that we were told to approve. And when we made comments on them, and when we tried to put together a board workshop on that, that meeting was canceled 35 minutes before it was supposed to happen and has not been rescheduled yet after repeatedly being asked of the board chair and of the Main Street manager to reschedule that meeting. Has not happened. So when you sit here and you look at me and you see an angry woman standing in front of you, yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry because my time has been wasted. I'm angry because my fellow board members' time has been wasted, and we have countless volunteers whose time has also been wasted. And I am tired of being the blame for this not working, because it is not our fault. That is leadership, and that's what it comes down to. So I go back to that financial data. Our ongoing concerns for the transparent reporting of Main Street funds has risen to the level of grave concern. Not only does the budget data provide accountability, but it also provides valuable information about the success and failure of past programs and events in order for us to look forward and to move forward. The treatment of board members and volunteers by leadership concerning the last-minute cancellation of board meetings, there were 2. And then another meeting that was supposed to be a workshop, that's another one, without having that been rescheduled. Our time, again, wasted. There's been clear favoritism of certain businesses to receive help, while others are ignored. I bring the example of the Simple Life, who brought many, many concerns to the city, to the Economic Development Office, and her concerns were never answered. And now that business is gone and has moved back to Frederick, and another business is taking over that space, quite literally within a week of her moving out. Trust. Let's talk about trust. Repeated requests have been made, but roadblocks, misinformation, and a lack of action by leadership has been the result. We've asked for workshops for 3 different agenda items: for bylaws discussion, for a budget, and for strategic planning for this board. This board wants to do strategic planning. We want to understand each other. We want to be able to move forward. I have asked in 2 different reports, I have given an outline of what a strategic planning session looks like, how it happens, how it gets facilitated, what the outcomes can be. Nothing has happened. So when you sit there and you say that this Main Street Board has done nothing, this Main Street Board has asked to do many things, and we have not been able to accomplish very many of them because we get no action from leadership. We have been left out of a meeting by the mayor and the economic development director when the Maryland Municipal League delegation was in town in the spring. Nobody was invited to that, and we could have talked to them about how their main streets are run and what they do and how we can get involved more and how we can get more information. Nobody knew about that meeting. Last summer, the Main Street manager, met with the director of the Main Street Maryland program. None of us knew. Nobody was invited to that meeting either. And in a statement to a council member, she stated the fact that she was really surprised that no one else showed up to that meeting because none of us were invited. Nobody knew that she was in town. That was last summer. And recently, we found out that there's an online training program that I've now registered for and other members of this board have registered for that is happening tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. All it would have taken was an email to us all saying, hey, this is available. Go sign up if you can. Great, thank you. But it didn't happen that way. There's also, I don't know if anybody's aware of this October in Frederick, Maryland is the Main Street annual meeting. And we could all go. That's assuming that we're all still Main Street board members. But that wasn't disseminated to us either. So in closing, I would just like to say that you talk about giving us guardrails and giving us bylaws. How about you give us the leave to do the work that we're intended to do? How about you give us the opportunity to be the grassroots organization that we're supposed to be and get some things done to improve this community and improve this downtown and bring businesses and create an environment in which investors and businesses and residents want to be and live and shop and come. Let's try that for a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for public comment pertaining to agenda items.
Mark Stevenson, 9 York. So what you've heard about Main Street, and you know, people I'm sure are tired of hearing about me talk about Main Street. Well, that's the only reason why we came to this town, because we saw the blight, and we saw basically almost what we still have, okay? We've done projects in the very towns that you guys went and toured on the Eastern Shore. We still have 2 businesses we incubated in that same downtown still thriving. So we know what we're doing. But because we're not from here, not these guys. Let me tell you something. All the stuff you've heard tonight, and Jim, I am disappointed. I'm disappointed. For 3 years, I've kept you in my sight because you understand what it's supposed to look like, and you threw that board under the bus tonight. You blamed them for the dysfunction of what's happening on Main Street when it's sitting right there. It's sitting right there. You want to talk about having all this power to do what you want to do with department heads, okay? I'm not saying whether you should or you shouldn't, all right? But when you're talking about what a department head should be doing, or any employee for that matter, all right? There's certain duties, certain obligations, certain, we'll just call them receivables, okay? That are expected. And if they're not being done, then there's a problem, right? Okay, let's start down the list. Besides the fact that we all know that the board was appointed in '22 and then did not meet for almost an entire year, this board was asked to put together a comprehensive package for what each of their committees wanted to do, okay? My wife, who we want to dance around the elephant in the room about the board situation, she submitted an 8-page plan, 8 pages of the things that the people on her committee wanted to do. It involved the police department with crosswalk safety and neighborhood walks. We tried to make a partnership with Parks and Recs to extend the beautification, not just off of Main Street, but into other parks, all right? She didn't quite get that far, but we still did the beautification down here on Main Street, all right? She did a cleanup. She did all kinds of things, but she submitted that in March of this year, as did the rest of the board members. The plan was you guys were supposed to receive them, and none of you did. He was supposed to give them to you, and Brandy Bollinger, the chair, was supposed to report it, or one or the other, or both. It doesn't matter. Their work never got reported to you. So you all sitting around here thinking, what the hell are these people doing? All right, they're putting time and effort into improving the community, and they are volunteers. They're not paid like this guy, okay? And they are delivering on their stuff. Main Street website, still not done. Jay Meese's responsibility. Fiscal spending, do we really want to go there? Because that's the real big bad word. You guys want to be in control of Main Street, but you don't want to keep track of the money. You want the community foundation to take care of the money. Well, they can only take care of what they receive as far as receivables, receipts, all that. They don't have all that. Whether you consider the Main Street Board an active board or an advisory board, they still need to know where the money is coming in and where it's going out. And month after month after month, they never get that information. Never. Since the last time it was a hot topic, they got one little credit card statement. But it wasn't even complete. It was like three things. It only counted the stuff that went through the community foundation, not all of the little debits that went on. No statements. They don't see anything. Right? And it really bothers me that you want to Monday morning quarterback this stuff. Okay? And you're carrying his water. You're carrying his water. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't defend him as your city employee. And I've never come out publicly against him until now. Until now. Because it's 3 years and we're still dealing with this. Okay? City manager doesn't know what to do because you guys make up all the rules as you go. Who's in charge of Jay? What do we do? What do we do here? What do we do here? So I understand why I'm disappointed that he threw this board under the bus. I do also understand that he doesn't know what to do because you guys don't make it clear. You want to put everything in your codes, but nothing's working right. All right, let's keep going. It was already brought up about the collaboration between the state from Main Street. It's already been brought up. Why? Why does a Main Street organization or state housing, urban development, whatever, they want to come and they want to meet? They don't want to meet with just him. They expected to meet with the board, the people who were actually out there coordinating the work. He never even let them know they were in town. He never even let them know that they were in town. Lack of communication or dereliction of duty, or you know what? This isn't working out well, so I don't want anybody to know. Whatever the reason, the board should have been notified. Let's face it, if you had somebody from the state coming in and meet with somebody about the city, you all would know about it, whether you could go to it or not. Never even gave them the chance. Never even gave them the chance. We won't go into the record because, you know what? You guys have been trying to control that ever since, too. Let's keep going down here. When we talk about Simple Lake, man, I wasn't going to bring it up. All right? You got a little crooked look on your face
when it was brought up that nobody responded to Helen at the Simple Life. And that's not entirely true, okay? You guys didn't respond, okay? I got a phone call after you guys did not visit, did not return a call, did not return an email. One of them was about the tenants upstairs throwing trash out on the street. So I called Daryl. Daryl took care of it. Got that straight. She had dope being dealed on the stoop. She had work van constantly parked in front of the shop. We made a phone call to the police department, and it got handled. Now, I don't know how many times she communicated with you guys, all right? But people on Main Street should not be calling me. They should have the confidence that when they call him, that he's going to do something. But he only does it for the people that he gets along with. And I can't tell you who he does and who he doesn't. All I know is that I've gotten quite a few text messages about all of the backbiting little gossipy bullshit from this guy about me or whatever. And I don't even care about that. I don't even care about that. But then you try and throw my wife under the bus, who's volunteering, putting together a freaking bigger packet than what I ever see come out of this freaking group, okay? Just on community stuff that she's doing in her spare time while she's managing hundreds of millions of philanthropic and government dollars doing the very same thing that we can't do for a block and a half. What pisses me off the most is that you sit up here, and I'm not talking about all of you, all right? Right now I'm talking to you, Chris, all right? Because you act like you've got some kind of great vision, some kind of great, I don't know, some kind of freaking expertise that's going to make all this great. But all you're doing is exactly the opposite of what you said you were about. You're about the people. You're all about the people. All right, but yet you get on a Facebook thread and disparage an open conversation that hasn't even happened yet from another nonprofit that wants to talk about a bypass. And you weighing in on that is contradictory to you saying, well, we don't want the news to come from the government, but you just weighed in on a conversation that the public wanted to have, and whether people like you or they don't like you, you're the mayor of the town. So your words have weight.
So weighing in on what's going on in the public would probably fall under something the mayor should do.
No, you don't disparage public conversation, public comment. If citizens want to get together and talk about something, what do you care? If you're interested in it, then show up and say your piece. You don't go out there and try to kill the idea before it even gets going. You make your case to the people, not on Facebook, man, before it even happened. I mean, you want to change all the rules. Dude, you can't be for the people and then weighing in against the people. And all I'm saying is, I'm using that on whether we build 1,000 houses, I shouldn't weigh in on that. What? On whether we should build 1,000 houses in a bypass, I shouldn't weigh in on that. Go to the meeting and talk about it. I can still weigh on it publicly. Man, I'm going to report one other thing. I'm going to report one other thing with the Simple Life. You're killing the open discussion. With the Simple Life. That's what you didn't go simple thing. It was like 8 freaking paragraphs. I'm talking about the Simple Life. Bottom line, let me finish up what we're doing here, okay? Feel free. And I'll go back to the point that I made about if you're gonna be in charge of somebody and you got certain responsibilities, all right? Countless examples of how Jay Mishi has obstructed the progress of what smart community people are trying to do with the Main Street group, all right? He made it personal. He attacked my wife publicly. But the main concern that she had, because she's pretty tough, she can take that bullshit, it's the money. Nobody knows where the money is coming or going. And he will not, after every single meeting, they talk about the money, and it never materializes. So I'm going to tell you guys, and this is what I'll say to all of you, okay? Fiscal responsibility is at the heart of ethics when it comes to government. The misappropriation of funds is a no-no. It don't matter how much money it is, okay? And when the sentiment of Main Street being a slush fund that's out there, it's out there, okay? And it's not for any other reason than you guys want to control what's happening, but you don't want to be accountable for the money, and you won't make him be accountable for it either. Because if you did, you would have presented some records, and you haven't done it yet. I don't want to get into some specifics because they'll be coming out in a future date, but I'm just going to tell you something. There are other people looking at this problem. People that are not city council people or Main Street people. People who, if they found enough, you guys are in up Schitt's Creek. Language. Sorry. I'm just telling you, you guys don't take it serious enough. I don't think you take Main Street serious at all. I think you all think it's a big joke. Bunch of little people that want to do some things or whatnot. Let me tell you something. There's people out there circling around that see the opportunities here too. But they haven't taken the bite like I took. Or like some of the other business people take. All right? And they're not coming until this stuff gets settled. Because it's too chaotic. They don't think that Taneytown is a bad place. They think it's just messed up right now. They think the leadership here is messed up. That's the outside view. Forget about all the Baltimore versus this or whatever. We're talking about investment people. People with money that want to make things happen. You're on the radar because of the potential. But you're not getting the bite because of this kind of crap that's going on. You can't even get a block and a half moving. And that's your reason. Right there. Jay Mishi is the reason why it's not happening. And you can say what you want. I could have come out publicly against him since he got here.
I've had a council member and you ask me to fire him for months.
But he did, damn right I have. I've been talking about it for 2 years. All right? Because the guy has actually put you guys at risk. And that guy calls my landlord of my building and tells them that they should kick me out because I'm not open. That's interference. All right? That's a civil violation, especially as somebody who is a public official. It's against the rules, bro. And I haven't pulled it, and I'm not going to pull it like that. All I want is for this stuff to move, man.
So I want it to move. I will say one of the biggest comments I've received from small businesses on Main Street has been that when they came here, they believed that there was going to be an ice cream shop and a coffee shop open imminently. And that was a promise made to them.
And that you want to throw it back on me because I'm not open? Let me tell you something, bro. Okay? I don't own the building over there. All right? But I'm rebuilding shit in there and stuff in there that I shouldn't have to because it's an old building.
We're all putting money in, Mark.
It doesn't matter. I'm not worried about that. Okay? But the fact that I'm not open right now doesn't mean that he's any damn better at his job.
But when you're blaming him for what why shops are leaving, one of the major concerns that have been brought to me is a shop not opening on the corner.
You didn't talk. You know what? We went through Mark by Helen when she was packing her stuff up to come up for a photo op for a cleanup, man.
I even had a text right here where she texted me on the day we were cleaning up Ballinger Park, asking about the stuff in front of her office, and I was going to contact Daryl. I was actually at an event responding back to her. Same thing when we arrived to her place in March.
It doesn't matter, man. No exceptions there, Chris.
She told me it doesn't matter. She said, everything's been resolved that we talked about, which we talked about with the police department as well. The issues that she was having at her place. And then not only that, again, it's the same thing I've heard from business owner after business owner. We thought there was going to be another catalyst opening on the corner.
Well, guess what? You can put it all on me all you want.
I'm not. Okay? I'm just saying it isn't just our economic development director.
Here's the point. You came out against Main Street during your election, but here you are on Main Street.
Nobody came out against Main Street. I just said let's focus on all the businesses in Taneytown. Instead of the conversation specifically in Main Street.
All right, I'm here. I think we're done here.
Jim, have we received anything from the state stating that there's something wrong with the finances on Main Street? No. Have we asked them if everything's okay so far with the Main Street program? I know, who did we ask a while back, and they said, everything kind of checks out so far.
The reporting has been submitted. The reporting's very broad.
Very broad.
Why haven't we gotten those reports as a board? No, none of us, sure. Why is that so hard? Why is it so hard to be transparent to the very people that you put on the board?
If you want to talk, please come to the podium. If you want to talk, please come to the podium.
I'm Bethany. I own in Taneytown. I am the chairperson of the organization committee. I read through the piles of garbage and financial information that was sent. I built a spreadsheet for Jay to use. She said he knew how to use Excel. I explained to him how to change formulas so he could give us monthly reporting in detail. And since I did that, we have got nothing but 3 lines. Beginning fund balance, change, and ending fund balance. We have to go back. What was that $800? And then he has to learn with this and this. No, I want to know what you spent the money on. I'm an accountant. That was what I did before I retired. So it's a thing called fiscal responsibility. I dealt with HUD. I dealt with federal grants every day. I went through federal grant audits, with HUD, and I had to account for things. Here, I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's still, there is fiscal responsibility, and I don't see it. I have been disrespected for the past 2 months in comments that have been made at the meetings that we can't meet without Stephanie at a meeting because we're going to write over the comments and we're going to ignore them. I read the comments, I agree with them, but somebody assumed and made the comment that we are going to do that. A comment was made the last meeting. Well, I was hoping the Main Street Board would get their act together and give us some numbers for budgets. We went back through all the minutes. I had copies of people's reports that said, well, this is what I need to do in my master plan. This is the dollars I need. We did our work. We just can't get the damn meeting. I'm the one that drove from Westminster, sitting outside City Hall, check my email and find out that the meeting's canceled. I don't come 5 minutes. I don't walk across the street from me. I get in my car and I drive. And with traffic, and sometimes it can be a half hour. That's disrespectful to me and my time. I've felt like that for months now. Nobody values anything. I mean, I figured out some issues with the Main Street financial reporting. And so I looked at it, nobody reconciled it back to see Ray's reports. You're just giving them stuff and hoping they pay out of their bank account. Well, we saw where they funded Taneytown, but for a cemetery in Westminster. $19,000. They took it back, but nobody can explain where that $19,000 came from until we dug through some information. That was one of Chris's questions. Nobody in Taneytown looked. I came in and I looked, and that's what I do. In my career, I cleaned up a lot of messes. I stayed, made a lot of audits. I would not be involved with this, be responsible for this financial data, because nobody can explain it to me. What was the $800 in the last report? Well, that was the flowers and the raises. We spent all that money for 6 people to come downtown and get flowers on such a Saturday. I found out the night before that I was actually handing out flowers in my store. I didn't know anything about that event. So there's no communication, there's no fiscal responsibility. It's not fair to point at us as the board that we're not doing anything. We try. I mean, I've seen people run off the board because of the way they're treated. I was left a long time ago. People treated me like that. It's been clear who they want there and who they don't. It's a lack of, there's just no leadership. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Any additional public, Paul, or?
I'm Scott Davis. I co-own Rust with my mom. And I want to give a unique perspective on this because I've been part of the Main Street in this town for almost 14 years. And I was asked to join Main Street when I made my first investment into Taneytown with Nancy McCormick. And so we did the first flower pots, we did everything. And Main Street back then was incredibly dysfunctional because it was led top down from City Hall. Because Nancy was not given much to work with, and in a vacuum, she did what she had to do to get things done. And the previous administration didn't like that, and they kind of tore Main Street apart and wanted to rebuild it. So, I've tried to invest in 3 different businesses and still have one here. The other 2 didn't quite make it. One was an art gallery, one was a bar and restaurant. And my advice, if it does come to restructuring, how the plan of Main Street is now, is don't rule from the top, because you have a problem where historically the town has been too involved in Main Street's decisions, and those things have now tainted the current Main Street environment, even through the longevity of the whole situation. So I think that it's very wise that if you are going to start from scratch again and kind of recharter Main Street, that it is an independent Main Street manager that is not associated with the current history of the town. Because there's just so many skeletons in the closet of Main Street over the past 14 years that I know about. Between the slush fund accusations are fairly true. Like, there was some shady stuff in the past that happened. And, I know them because Nancy told them to me in confidence, but it's, its whole process has been tainted, and Main Street tries so hard to do good. I mean, I was in the meeting that approved the Christmas lights that Councilwoman Fuller wanted. So, these are all things that we've positively moved forward on Main Street, even though we've been inhibited. But this current iteration that was kind of chartered by the previous administration was targeted as a goal to take Main Street back over, and it just has not been successful. So if it's going to be successful again, Main Street needs to be independent without a lot of town control, but the influence and fiscal responsibility and funding and all that stuff still needs to exist. But if we look and learn anything from the past of where we've been, trying to implement it again in the future isn't going to get you anywhere. And I've been hesitant to invest more in the town again since a lot of this stuff has happened, but I'm still here. I still live outside of town. I still own a business here in town with my mom. And the best advice I can give is grassroots, independent, set them up for success. Like, the key in manager is to set your employees up for success. That has not existed in any form of Main Street in the last 14 years. There has been no direction of success of what Main Street should be delivering. It's been, here's some money, here's a guideline from the state, try to do something. So I highly think that bringing those representatives in to train people that want to be a part of it and appointing an independent Main Street manager and actually moving everything forward is probably going to be the best thing for optics, and it's also going to be the best thing for Main Street. So that's kind of my piece, and I didn't really know I was coming to listen to tonight, but I figured I should at least give some of that perspective.
Thank you. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Paul?
Just a short follow-up to what I said before. Think about all the successes that we've had in our city. Think about, the event of the parade and the citizens and how happy they were and what a successful event that was. Flowers being handed out by the Main Street Committee to, the women along the parade route. Think of those good feelings and the good feelings you had when you were in the parade with the community. Think about the exciting events that have happened in the parks and the good feeling that you're getting from that. And you think about the good feeling when you go into Stonehouse Cafe and get a great sandwich or, a sweet thing that you get. Think about all these good things. Main Street, we can do a U-turn and go in the opposite direction. Don't let us lose that Main Street designation, because if you lose it, you might not ever get it back again. And it is a real asset for many of the cities in Maryland and throughout the country. If you want to get inspired, go to the Main Street America website. There are free seminars and things for both businesses and cities to follow. I don't know how long Mish has been a member of Main Street America. I'm assuming it's been for a couple of years. The city is a member. They're the only ones that can be a member. But, there's just a wealth of information and inspiration from that. So that's all I wanted to say. Let's not lose our designation. It's too important to hold on to.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Again, I don't think we're going to let that happen here. I think we just
No, yeah,
are.
that's certainly not the intent, is to let that get away. But I think,
Additional public comment pertaining to agenda items. Hearing none, I am looking for a motion of adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.